Hi, I'm Sam Fernando, Head of Public Sector for Robert Walters. On the podcast today, we're going to be talking all things PSA, how to win in government, and how to be a successful desk. Make Gov sexy, and you do not want to miss this episode.
Welcome back to another episode of Confessions of a Recruiter. We're so lucky to have Samantha Fernando from Robert Walters. You are Head of Public Sector for Queensland. And guys, this is going to be a really interesting podcast because a lot of people we get on the podcast, they all come from private sector backgrounds, but government, public sector, it's unknown to many recruiters. So Samantha, I appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's dive in because government tenders, PSAs, all this kind of thing. There's probably a lot of misconceptions out there in this realm of recruitment. So before we kind of get into that though, walk us through your experience in government recruitment, just for a little bit of context on the conversation.
Even before recruitment, because I think you being on the other side of the fence will give really good context.
I, like most people, I fell into recruitment. I've got a background in economic policy. So I used to work for a not-for-profit or non-partisan organisation in Sydney where we'd look at this is what the legislation's saying, this is what policies that government come out to, and how does that actually impact businesses across all private sectors. So to give you an example, way back then, there was a big push on the gender equality pay gap in Australia. So federal government launched WGEA, which is the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. Now, most businesses in Australia go, right, that's fantastic. How do we look at this? How does this impact our business? How does this impact our shareholders? So my job was to work with CEOs of organisations like CBRE and others to say, this is a legislation that's passed. Here's a department that's done. This is what you, as a business in Australia, need to do to be playing your part in it, and this is how it's going to actually land for you 4 or 5 years down the line. Part of that strategy was to work with them to say, actually, you need to recruit someone who's heading up your D&I strategy. You currently don't have someone spearheading that, and you've got a boardroom full of Peter Pauls and so on and so forth.
What's D&I strategy?
Diversity and inclusion strategy. How to look at your female participation in your workforce, and then think about how do you remunerate your managers. That's what's required in the legislation. So as part of that, I worked with Randstad to place one of the heads of D&I, and I thought, this is really fun. You get to actually problem solve, not just conceptually, but actually go, okay, this is your gap, this is your organisation, this is the kind of person that's going to make some magic and actually get along with everyone to make that change happen. And I think at the heart of it, that's what recruitment is. It's problem solving and finding the right fit. So I found recruitment through a side way in, ended up actually falling in love with it, and sort of the rest is history. Been in public sector recruitment ever since.
Nice.
Amazing.
And let's chat about your first role into recruitment with Randstad, because I thought Randstad would have lockdown government contracts and they'd be one of the biggest players. But when you started, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, so Randstad had we had a matrix model, and one of the things I really love about Randstad is I think they had a lot of government contracts, that's right, but they also had a really interesting strategy on how to win with them. So we had, and this is no secret, but we have a matrix structure. We had a matrix structure where you had people who understood the contracts and understood their subject matter expertise really well. And they would work with consultants across the board to say, how do we win with these clients? How do we improve your way of working with them? How do you BD into them? How do you grow your business and your desk? So rather than leave it up to, managers or team leaders to say, here's your strategy for your desk and your team, it was these subject matter experts who would come in and feed in the how-to. So I came in as a client manager for the public sector division in Canberra, and I was looking at Frank's feedback to me was, well, we've got the Austrade agreement, which is the all of government big PSA that covered all federal government back in the day. And he said, I'd like you to help our business grow market share wallet using this.
Who's Frank, just to clarify?
Frank is the CEO of Randstad ANZ.
Yep.
So he was my into recruitment. He's the one who said and taught me how recruitment works. So I'm a big believer in following the right people and people who inspire you. But yeah, Frank was my my awesome leader that I still go, what a legend.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, so that was sort of the agreement there, that come along, have a think about where are we winning as a business, how do we help consultants go, okay, thank you for the PSA, but how do I win on my desk and my roles and my candidates? How do I make the 2 and 2 work?
Mm-hmm.
So my job was working across the first about 14 consultants in Canberra, but then looking at the whole of Randstad, which is about, I can't even remember the whole workforce, but there was circa about 65 consultants that I would work with across the board.
Did you ever feel, because you weren't in recruitment, obviously you understood the policies and how to kind of fill the gap. Did you ever feel a bit of imposter syndrome on how to tell these recruiters what they should be doing to build their desk?
Oh, always.
Okay. Yeah.
I still feel that way. Like, even though I've been in recruitment for so long, right? That feeling of you don't want to come across as super cocky all the time telling people what to do. You know, you go, there's a little voice in your head saying, oh, did I come across as a bit of an ass just then? Sorry. So that's definitely there. I actually had another in confessions, I had one of the managers once actually call that out in a meeting when I said, this is the strategy, this is how you win. And I don't know what the personality clash there was, but he did say, well, you've never recruited. How would you even know? And in my head, I was like, oh God, the jig's up. They all know the secret. But luckily no one else revolted.
What'd you say back to that?
Yeah. How do you combat that?
I did take a breath. I think for me that did catch me totally off guard, because I've never heard of anyone doing that. But then the fact remained, which is I'm not teaching them how to recruit. I never was the person who says, let me teach you the one-on-ones of recruitment. I was telling them, how do you win in government? And I did jokingly say, well, you've never worked in government, so touche, let's carry on.
Yeah, that's a great response. Good measured response. I like that.
I was like, oh, hope everyone had found that funny, but we got over it pretty quickly. And the ones who were winning were making a lot of money and they didn't really care. Yeah. And I was like, love it, they're my people. Let's go.
Yeah. So you went into Randstad. You worked initially with 16 consultants in Canberra, up to 65 consultants. Yeah. So what were the biggest learnings in your initial recruitment phase of Randstad, trying to help them win more government work?
Good. Initial learning was, how do we change the perception of government even within the recruitment space? So government has this stigma of being boring and dull and it isn't? I know. We had this saying, so I'm skipping ahead, but at 6 Degrees when I was there, we had this saying, it's like, Gov is sexy, and we were trying to champion it, saying we're going to keep telling it until someone believes us, until we believe it ourselves.
Gov is sexy.
Gov is sexy.
That's going to be the tagline. That's going to be our thumbnail. When
that's Sam Rubino. That's ingrained in his brain.
Gov is sexy.
I'm going to credit this to Sam Rubino, because he did say this. Sam used to be, for context, someone I worked with at 6 Degrees. He's a legend, and we coined this around the business, going #Gov is sexy. So whenever anything government came up, we're like, Gov is sexy, make it happen.
That's so
Put it on
good.
your job ads.
Yeah.
We once had a birthday cake with #Gov is sexy, and the poor baker was like, what is this? Like, we're going to make it happen. Someone's going to believe us.
Oh, that's so good.
But that was my definite first learn, saying, oh, I may think I'm a nerd and I love government, and not everybody believes that, and I've got to slowly change that perception.
So how did you do that? How did you, at Randstad, try and change the perception of gov recruitment for the recruiters?
Well, what motivates people, right? So gov motivates me because I think it's fascinating how everything that we do, all commercial and private sector, is really dictated by the government. And I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about the government departments themselves, everything from federal to state to local. Everything we do depends on the way those interactions happen. So I love and understanding what it is that people do in Australia's biggest employer. But consultants on the desk, love that. It's interesting, but don't care. Their priority is, and I understand, our priority is, how do I be profitable? How do I get my bonus? And how do I land roles and get my jobs on and be promoted? So I was like,
Nailed it. Yep, that sounds right.
and make it easy.
Yeah.
So I had to go, okay, how do I make a match of the two? So the truth is Gov is Australia's biggest employer. So if you stop thinking about, the fancy brands of the world, it is the biggest company, like the Wesfarmers of the world, of Australia, right? So I'm like, that means let me show them exactly how much is in that pot of gold. So I started talking about, this is their spend in your market, sort of narrowed it really, really down to going, this is how much the Gov pot of gold is. This is your desk, and your plan of attack is this many dollars, this many jobs. Your competitors are so and so and so. Now go. You have a plan of attack on how to steal X, Y, Z dollars of that into your pocket. So it becomes really tangible when you start saying, did you know they spend $136 million in your bucket? They're like, what? I'm like, yep. And out of that 136 million, about 10 million of that is in your patch that you recruit for. Did you know this? No. How do I get into that? Well, if you speak to these 3 clients and keep going at it and build a relationship, and they send you, 10 of those jobs, this is how much you could add to your bucket every month. And they're like, well, oh, okay. So it becomes a bit more accessible, and it's not this, fugazi of, government policy, blah, blah, blah.
How do you know that information? How do you know, they're spending 136 million nationally, in your area they're spending $10 million? Like, where do we find this info?
I have my spies, but
okay. Okay.
No, one of the thing about government, it is a transparent landscape. They do publish a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just about knowing, again, coming back to PSA world, being in tenders and being in these agreements land. Part of my job is to research who are the other suppliers on there, how much are they actually, what's our business case for being on this PSA? Sometimes it's dollar figures, sometimes it is, it's actually good brand awareness. So thinking as a business rather than thinking as a recruiter sometimes is the best way to be on PSA land. And part of that is they tell you and say, well, we're actually spending this much. Not directly, but they're on tender documents and other areas in which they publish their estimates and budgets. You get to look at how much they're actually spending on HR services.
So is this like a government portal or?
It depends on which government we're talking about. So federal government, yes, there is a tender portal, so Oz Tender.
Yep.
It does tell you. So if you go to, from if I'm speaking to a recruiter, I'd say have a think about your commercial director or somebody working in that marketing space who can talk to you about the reports in the back end. They publish this, and it's really easy to have a look at how much they spend. Most agencies already know this. They usually have someone like me in their organisation to say, this is how much government spend in this area. Now, it's a little bit of a measured science. You don't get to know exactly dollar for dollar, but you can make a fairly good assessment on the pots this big.
Okay, because this is probably a myth. And I certainly believe this up until 5 minutes ago, that if you're on a government tender, you get spoon-fed heaps of work and you don't have to do any chasing. And it's basically you just get a job brief emailed to you, you get the job brief out and you go, all right, I'll start submitting some candidates. Is that what government recruitment is like?
No.
Okay. You don't just sit on Hourglass?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm sitting by poolside, rolls covered.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what? That fallacy has led to why we have 148 suppliers on government tenders. And you think, oh, why is every man and his dog recruiting in the space and not winning the spend? It's because jobs don't land out of the blue sky. Now, I can say why that rumour got started, because sometimes it does happen, because government has to have this equality measure. So some of the roles, they have to go to two other agencies. And part of the procurement rules is if it's over a certain amount of cost, even for a contract job, they have to go to a big agency, they have to go to a small agency, and agencies no one's heard of. And typically what happens is, so hiring managers sitting at their desk, they're going, oh, I've got to recruit someone. It's taking me 6 weeks to get this job approved in the first place. And now procurement is telling me that I need to go to 2 other suppliers. I've already built a relationship with Joe Bloggs here. So they get sent this list of 148 recruitment agencies and they go, good Lord, pick 2 at random. And they send the job to the 2 others because they know they've got the relationship with the recruiter here.
Oh, so they're just doing it for the process.
Correct.
Bit of a box ticking exercise.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so what we have this fallacy in market going, oh, the jobs get sent to you. I'm like, if they're getting sent to you, you're not going to land them. I mean, you might if the preferred supplier trips up or has COVID or something. Good luck, not good management, right?
Okay, so let me just break this down. So government department,
Yeah.
they're trying to fill this role. They're getting frustrated. They first point of call is to do it themselves.
Yep.
If they can't do it themselves, then they get the PSA panel up.
Yep.
And they go, right, I've got to choose 3 people to send this job brief to.
Yeah.
But Mary calls me every 4 weeks and we've built a great relationship. So I'm definitely giving it to Mary.
Yep.
But I'm just going to send it to these 2 agencies as well, just so I can say I've done the procurement process, and then Mary's going to help me fill the job.
Correct.
So as a recruiter, you still need to hustle
Absolutely.
and build relationships and gov recruitment.
Absolutely.
You can't wait for essentially jobs on to get handballed to you that are the easiest jobs to fill.
Absolutely. So if you're one of the consultants sitting there going, oh, I'm so good at government recruiting, I've got 10 jobs on, and I've only spoken to 2 of the hiring managers of those 10 jobs, chances are you'll fill 1.
Okay.
Out of 10.
Out of 10.
So that's even worse odds than private sector.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Because in private sector, at least you can, and again, been on both sides of the fence, right? You can influence a lot more clearly. You can take them out for a drink. You can talk to them about how great you are and how you're going to, romance your candidates. There's a way of doing that in government. But
What is
Politicians
it?
love the night out, don't they? What is this?
How do we romance the government people?
Oh, that's not obviously. That's what I'd say.
Yeah,
so you
yeah.
can't be seen to take, like now they're locking down so much that we can't even take them out for coffees. They have to pay
Really?
for coffees themselves. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Because it's seen to influence and that sort of thing. But you can influence by taking a genuine interest. And I know that's such a school teacher answer to give. But just seriously, if you think about the consultants in government who are so profitable and the biggest billers in the organisation, that's because they focus their attention. They know every person in comms or every person in policy. They know their market so well that they focus it so uniquely because they spend in buckets, right? If you try and be a master of everything, you're going to be probably the greatest average recruiter in market.
Yep.
But if you want to get to that sweet spot of, I don't even want to BD. I put it this way. So I started recruiting myself because I wanted to be on the tools after that person called me out and said, you don't know how to recruit. So I was like, oh, God, I've got to learn to do it myself because how else can I sort of tell people how to build your desk?
Yep.
Yep.
I've built businesses, but I've not built a desk. So I did start recruiting and put my hand up and recruited executives.
How'd you go? What was the first couple of months like?
First couple of months is, again...
regretted it?
No, like I think
Oh shit, that guy was right.
Oh, shit. Oh, I don't want to
no,
build this
no.
desk. What have I done?
blackout sleep.
Where's the portal? Where's the portal?
Going back, no, luckily, what I was doing this, it was like an audit role or something niche, something so, again, with introverted people as much as possible. And I don't know, surprise, I'm an extrovert and I scare people who are very bookish. But it was like an engineering role or something, I can't remember. But I remember picking it up and my biggest challenge was, I'm a big ideas person. I'm like, oh, idea, let's go to the next one. And recruitment sometimes, especially these really tenured and detailed roles, is you've got to sit with it and get back to all your candidates. Oh, man, I struggle with that.
Yeah.
Put things on this CRM and log your calls. All of the things that make me want to cringe and cry. So that was a struggle town.
Okay. Yep. Every recruiter's nightmare is admin and updating the database.
So I belong. I'm one of you. Yes.
Yeah.
But so I struggled through that. But placed the candidate. And they were fine. It was good to know. Oh, I can do this. It's not too hard, but it's also learning to have that discipline.
100%.
Yeah.
And you learnt recruitment for the first time,
Yeah.
and then in a matter of a 2-3 year period, you took Randstad from 11th on the list out of 148 to number 1 supplier in Gov.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Yeah, how'd you do that?
Honestly, it sounds so much more fluffy than it is, but the truth is, it's just work smarter, not harder. So
How do you work smarter? What's the smartest way to work?
Honestly, and the only way I know how to work is take a step back, right? And I think it really helped. I lent into the fact that I've not been a career recruiter. I didn't start from a graduate all the way up. So I was like, well, where are my strengths? Knowing what my buckets are. Same advice I'd give to candidates, right? Say, know your things that you've done. For me, it was, all right, I can look at it from a big picture lens. So step right back. Where's the spend in market? It doesn't matter whether we're 11th or 50th or who gives a toss, right? It's everything is what does the market see? Because you can kind of go and say we're amazing, but if the market is not saying it, it doesn't matter. So I had a look at the market spend, and 67% of government spend at the time was outside of Canberra. So whilst I had 16 consultants who are dedicated to government, focused in the same market, what happened to the rest of Randstad? We had 12 offices, 12 key areas that we operated in across the country with nobody working on anything federal. I'm like, well, most of the spend is there. Why are we not fishing in that ocean? So part of my role was to go visit an office once a week. And I, again, focused my attention on 2 or 3 consultants who were interested in government, wasn't trying to make waves. I was trying to make just a little ripple. And so I focused on the 1 or 2 consultants in every office. I started BDing for them. I booked in client meetings, took them to it. And when they started landing a couple of jobs, there was, oh, hey, how are they making money on that? Can I get in on that? Back then, it was also margin was fantastic in government, but it's going down a little more and more now. But at the time, I was like, your commercial clients aren't paying you this much.
Yeah.
Let me show you how to win and get a slice of this. Because it started being boring and started being a cash flow sort of conversation. You know, Melbourne got really excited, Sydney got really excited, Albury got really excited, and Geelong got really excited. So we ended up sort of booking in all of these East Coast meetings, and roles started flowing because we were converting them. And that's how we ended up going number 1, because we had a spread and share of that wallet nationally, not just in Canberra. That's how I got promoted to being federal director based out of Brisbane, because it was okay, you can see this momentum carry on. It's not keep hammering what we already do and try for something else. We had talented managers to do that, to help consultants tighten up their strategy on a desk. We just had to think bigger.
So why weren't they doing that already? Like, let me regurgitate to you what I think I just heard.
Yeah.
So you've had all these gov recruiters that are, sounds like reactive recruiters that are actually embodying the whole waiting for jobs to come to them mindset. And then you've come along and go, hey guys, we need to get more proactive.
Yeah.
We need to start getting in front of people and start winning more jobs.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until you showed them, I don't know if you knew who the hiring manager was or you knew a better way to approach them or something like that. But you started sitting with them, showing them better BD strategies to get more proactive. And then they started winning the jobs, and then they started actually being a proactive recruiter again. Yeah. Is that what I'm picking up here?
Yeah, it is. But I think the funny thing, now that I look back, right, it's the account manager role that most recruitment agencies have. And most account managers tend to sit back and go, here's a client, go BD. No one told me that when I started. So I thought it was my job to BD into them. So I would set the meetings initially up. Again, it wasn't, I don't want to come across as like, oh, I was a saving grace, because probably somebody was doing it. But what I was told, what I didn't know is this is your job to grow our share wallet. So I was like, right, okay, don't really care what people's done before me or after me. I didn't really dig into it. I just went, okay, that's my job. I'm going to go hand for leather and understand where they're winning. Asked consultants on the desk saying, what clients do you work with at the moment? What jobs do you fill? Again, learn with a bit of curiosity. And I think the ones that gave me feedback anyway would say most account managers never stop to ask what we do. Or never stop to go, what does your desk look like? What are your pain points? Let's invest in you, as opposed to, here, call these people.
Yeah, interesting. So they weren't ever actually getting proactive and trying to get into new divisions of government. They were just dealing with the existing accounts that are already there.
Just like basic like objection handling, right? Sometimes they'll say most objections most people get in government is like, oh, we've already got the supplier that we use, or we'll come out to you next time we have a job. And people then go, okay, I'll wait till the job comes on.
Yeah.
But it's
wow, this is like a whole new.
I know, mind blown. But I think it's how do you persist? How do you influence? How do you then speak government language to get past that initial objection of don't call us, we'll call you. So it was working. It didn't happen overnight. It took a bit of time and momentum. And I had to find, again, part of the strategy, I had to find the ones that are really interested in government and want to actually grow that space.
Sorry to just jump in there. It just seems like government is just a niche that everyone else has, whether you work in tech, whether you work in manufacturing, whether you work in blue collar, whether you work in government. Government has this kind of vibe to it, like it's so hands off and hard to get into, but ultimately you still have to do all the same things as any other recruiter has to do in their niches.
Yeah.
It's just that your niche is in government and your company has to win a PSA before you get there, but then you're still a 360 recruiter going to hustle to win the jobs.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if there are any recruiters out there that are interested to find out what it's like to have a VA support them in their role, whether that be to bill more, reduce tasks that they don't enjoy doing, or be a more effective recruiter in their niche, then we definitely recommend reaching out to the Outsource People or TOP. Reach out to them, inquire on how they can implement a VA in your agency and to support you. And if you mention ex-recruiter or Confessions of a Recruiter, they will give you a 13% discount off your bill per month on this VA that will allow you to scale your business, scale your desk, and to bill more and make more money. So go reach out to the Outsource People, say Confession sent you, get your discount and see what is possible.
Do you think recruitment training and getting consultants proactive in thinking that sales, business strategy, is that something that's missed in most agencies?
Big call to make. I think there's always room to do that, right? Anyone that's passionate about recruitment or want to be really good at that space has that attitude of continual learning and wants to, or has a curious mindset of what's someone else doing here that I can do better, or how can I up my game better, right? So yeah, I think that strategic thinking needs to definitely be in the forefront of anyone that's really successful. Well, that's my opinion anyway. Like, I don't know if that's if I can say that about every agency because I haven't been to everyone.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then what made you go to 6 Degrees? 'Cause they had no footprint in government.
Yeah.
But they were on a panel.
Yes, yeah. How exciting is that though? Like, if you're sitting there and you're thinking about a strategy for your own career development, and you just come across. Well, 6 Degrees were a client of mine, so I decided to get out of the recruitment game. Actually.
Oh, really?
I was like, I'm done with this business. I used to travel once a week. I barely saw my family. I saw more of the airport than my house. So I thought, I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore. I love recruitment, but I need to go, be my own boss. So I started my own company.
Nice.
Because I wanted to consult a little bit like what you were saying before, right? It's that art of the game. How do you influence? How do you work with executives to look at their own strategy? So not just bring people in, but entire employee life cycle. And then 6 Degrees were a client of mine. So I reached out to them through a former colleague that I worked with. And they were like, look, we want a strategy in government. Can you lay out how to do that for us? So they were amazing to work with. So I pitched a desktop audit and gave them a 5-year strategy and said, this is what your business can look like 5 years down the line. These are the clients you should go after. This is where you're good at, where you're not good at. This is the skills and training you need. I ended up going and seeing them every day, and so much so that they were like, do you want to just work here and maybe roll the strategy out as opposed to see you later? And I said, yeah, that'd be awesome. I ended up actually closing down my business and ended up jumping in full-heartedly into working with them. We ended up recruiting a couple of consultants who were awesome to start off with, and then, well, they're still awesome. But it was great to sort of have a team and then go, this is what government recruitment can look like if we could do it from scratch and bring sort of that executive recruitment ethos into it. And so it was a really good opportunity to build something from scratch.
So how did 6 Degrees get on so they went through the whole process of getting on a panel for Gov and not doing anything with it?
No, look, it's like anything else in government, right? And again, you get on a PSA is not a free meal ticket to just jobs pouring down the funnel. You still need to know how to, and like you asked me before, how do you know who the hiring managers are? How do you map out your clients? Who are the people like that takes a little bit of people who have been in government for a long time to know. It's no different from working in a commercial sector. It's like I can't be suddenly planted into a banking and finance desk and go win, the Westpac. How? Who's the person who's got the relationship? How do we crack into that? So I think that part of that strategy was to find people who knew that, who knew how to crack into that space.
Okay, so they won the PSA, didn't know how to crack into the space, and then got you to help them build out the Gov recruitment team?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say they wouldn't know completely how to get into it. I think there was an appetite for it, there was an interest for it, and the key people in Brisbane really actually understood that there's government, there's hiring managers work roughly this way, but that little gap of how do we make what we do best in market service that area niche. So that was my job that's how I got into working with them. They said it was perfect timing. We've got onto this panel. Can you now tell us the details? How do we get in? We've got the theory. We understand the loose concept. Now map out a couple of people for us and let's look at the consultants that we need to bring on the table to do the work and build those relationships and influence. So that's where I was brought in and a couple of the people that we hired were brought in to do as well.
Can we go through the detail now? Like, say you're building out government from scratch.
Yeah.
Because do government even consider small players, or do you have to be of a certain size?
Government, like any client, right? And I think it's the same thing. They consider anybody that can service. They have a need. Any government is no different to any other hiring manager that we work with or any hiring manager we come up. They have a problem, and recruiters, our job is to solve that problem, and understand their problem to solve it in the first place. So I don't think they really care if you're big, small, or wherever you are, as long as you can solve that immediate need. Whether you're in a big shop or a small shop, that depends on how quickly you can solve that problem and the fun tools you have at your disposal to solve that problem efficiently. So it's about leveraging what you have. So if I was talking to a consultant that's interested in getting into government right now, it's try and find the key people who are, I'd find a mentor if you've never worked in government before. Try and find out, and your candidates are your best source. So if you don't know how to find a recruiter who's worked in government before, speak to the candidates. Who have you worked for before? Who's your manager at this role? What did you learn? What did you think? Have you been represented by a different agency before? What worked well for you? So have those questions in your back pocket, and that's how you map your market. That's how I'd map. That's how I got into recruitment in the first place, right? Like, who do you work with? How do you? When I was recruiting the D&I head, is who have you worked with before? What have you found out about executives like Corn Ferry, or have you worked with, Henriksen Strugels? What have you learnt about that executive search practice? Did they help you with your strategy once you were placed? No. Did they contact you after 6 months? No. I'm like, well, I will contact you after 6 months. I will talk to you about your strategy, and that's how you find your niche within a niche. You become the problem solver for them.
So you focus on candidates first. That would be the number one thing.
Yep.
Or would you pick parallels like, say, the fisheries and then go into that? Or how do you decide whether you're going to go federal, state, local?
Well, it depends on the agency or the agency you're with and the PSAs you currently can service. Let's assume you're with, agency that can have all three. I'd say the biggest spend is in federal, but there's challenges there. You've got to be good at knowing how a contract works. There's a lot of nuance to that panel. So if you don't have the patience to know forms and documents and ways of working, give that a miss as your first foray, because that's a surefire way for you to lose interest and hate government. State government, depending on the state you're in, again, a little bit more straightforward. So if you're a recruiter that wants to work at pace and doesn't really want the details, pick a state government agency. In that case, have a think about, really simply, if you're thinking about which department to go after, split your departments into two things, I'd say. Have a think about the departments that you interact with as a citizen of whichever state you're in. So, for example, TMR, no surprise, everybody here has a license or a car they've got to register or some form of identification, so they go to TMR at some point in their lives. So you already know and have an interaction and you're already a stakeholder in that business. So think about how you interact with them. What are the touch points that you have within government? So for me, I'd say, well, I've got to do my rego. So I have to think about each of the offices that can service my registration in my car. Then I already know the people who work there, that are business support people. You can kind of reverse engineer it if you just sort of demystify government on the departments that you interact with. So Queensland Health, I don't really talk to anybody from Queensland Health except doctors and nurses, but I don't recruit in that space, so leave that to people who do. But what about the people who run the hospitals? What about the people who... You start looking at departments a little bit differently around when you start thinking about it from your own lens of how much you interact with them. So that's one way to go about it, and split your departments in the ones that you interact with. The other half are the departments that you don't. They're the ones that do the bigger strategic planning. So, your Department of Education, for example. Yes, they have teachers, but they also run the education strategy for the state. So if you are more policy-minded or you're more communications-minded, that's all the desk that you work with and candidates are in that space. Maybe, veer your strategy towards those departments that don't interact so directly with people.
That's really interesting. So if I was an agency owner and I wanted to get into some sort of government recruitment field, And my first, I guess, step one would be try and go for a state government kind of tender. Is that right?
I'd say, yeah, look, if you're an agency owner, it's again a different conversation, right? Have a think about where your agency is best placed to serve. I mean, again, like I said, if you've got someone on staff who understands how contracts and PSAs work within government, I think there's a lot of spend across all of them, so state, federal and local. So you can tier your business towards that area and then how you can service them. I know I'm giving a very government answer here, and that is because, again, there's such a nuance in each of those tenders and PSAs. It's not just, here's a role, we fill them.
Okay, so this is what's going through my head right now.
Go on, yeah.
Okay, so I'm a recruitment agency owner. I've got a couple staff.
Yeah.
And I go, I want a piece of the pie of government recruitment.
Yeah.
Step one is my agency recruits sales and marketing and let's just say sales and marketing roles.
Yep.
So what am I going to do to get, how do I pivot into government recruitment? Do I just go on the Gov website and see what, the TMR spur? Like you're talking about our relationships with government.
Blake's got a great relationship with
I know, I'm
with
testing you now.
Yeah. And so then I go, all right, so I'm going to go reach out to apply for some TMR tender. Like what do you do? Like what is the practical next steps for me as a small agency owner that wants to get on Gov?
Yeah.
How do I, and I'm a perm recruiter, what's step two? I go to Queensland Health.
Perm recruitment is a hard one to get into government. I'll say there's about 1 to 2% of government spend on perm recruitment.
Oh, so really? Okay.
So
I need to pivot to contract recruitment first.
Step one, abandon ship.
Okay.
Step two, change your entire business model. But but no, I think so if you're a perm recruiter, that's a bit of a challenge, right? Why do you want to get into government in the first place? Because it's going to be a very hard slog. It's probably not your strategic direction to, yes, I get there's a big pie, but it's one of those things, again, if you're going to chase something you're not good at, you're probably going to only make a tiny portion of it in the first place. It's a lot of investment. But if you're a contract recruiter and you go, maybe I can be a contract recruiter. I'm not. I can train contract recruiters, but I know what I'm not, which is a contract recruiter, right? And if you know you are one, have a think about, and again, I'm speaking to an agency owner here, I'd say have a think about how you're best placed to service a client, especially in government. Even if it's in the comms and marketing space, then you need to look at when the tenders are coming out. Again, this is public knowledge. It's on each of the government areas have their own tender websites that they put out a public tender for. So you have to wait a few years to get into it. And that's it. That's the only big sort of roadblock for getting into government is most of these tenders go for 6 to 8 years. And then
6 to 8 years.
6 to 8 years.
Boy.
And then you miss it.
And you could miss it. And if you miss it, it's probably worth not chasing it because you might get some of your spend outside a panel, but it's going to be a very uphill climb. Look, and I say this and say if you're going to play the long game, build relationships and ask questions. Again, candidates are a really good source for that. They can sometimes lend you an opportunity to get in through the back door, which is we've got the spend, our current panelists don't service it, we can go out to market. Again, that's a very steep climb because, like I said, there are 148 suppliers on that market. So usually procurement will say to this hiring manager, have you tried all 148?
Yeah.
Chances are they're going to go, nope. And it's pretty unlikely to sort of get there. And I don't want to be discouraging, but what I'd say is if you've missed the panel boat, wait for a couple of years because that's a better play into government.
So there's obviously lots of panels, lots of PSAs, lots of tenders that you can go for.
Yeah.
I guess if you miss one for a 6 to 8 year period, maybe you wait for the next one that comes up in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
That goes for is it staggered? New panels and new PSAs are coming out every year that you can have a crack at.
Probably not every year. Every couple of years, they'll probably have a new iteration or a refresh. Again, very similar to PSAs in commercial land as well. Same thing. Once you get locked out of one, you can sometimes get in if you provide a niche that none of the other panelists provide. With the volume of providers at the moment, I think it's very unlikely that you do unless you're an Indigenous recruiter or a recruiter that only does disability recruitment or anything that's very specific in your market. Otherwise, I'd say wait for the couple of years. You will get a panel fresh out to market, watch the tender websites. And if you'll be able to sort of get through.
Would you be able to write a tender yourself, or should it be good to go and see an expert, maybe like yourself, who's done it before, to get a higher probability of success? Like how difficult is it to actually win a tender or be on a PSA for a government panel? Do they give it out like lollies, or are they really like do they go through everything with a fine-tooth comb and reject a lot of people? Or
they go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. There is a art to tendering. I think when I say that is because there's two things, right? You can tender to win or tender to be successful. So
what's the difference?
Yeah,
the difference is if you tender to win a seat on the table, you can put your margins as low as you want. And the reason it's not a good play, and this is what happened in New South Wales. If I use New South Wales government as a example, there was a time when the margin in New South Wales government was fantastic. There was all the people were winning good business. The candidates are good quality. Consultants working on it were making sufficient revenue. But then one of the big players decided that, I know, let me hamtail everyone and go super low because I want all the market share. Now, that's a really good short-term strategy. But what it did, it brought the entire margin for the whole industry down to a ridiculous amount. I mean, it's the cheapest panel I've ever come across in my life.
What's the margins?
It's like $1.50. It's
$1.50 an
it's
hour.
ridiculous. It's like cheap
For a business support or
for
tech?
They've capped it at $1 amount.
Isn't it like $7 now or something? The new tender, some sort of. Sorry, excuse me. I saw something coming out that now the government's saying we're just capping all recruitment at $7 an hour that you can make as margin or something.
It's not quite that high. Like in New South Wales, I'm just using that particular panel as an example, right? They've capped it at a really, really low amount because one of the agencies a few years back went in for a very low amount and they thought, great, we're going to win all the jobs. That's what I mean, the difference between being successful and win, because what that did is then brought everybody else down. They don't get good quality candidates on that panel. They don't, because who wants to work on that? I wouldn't.
No consultant would.
And you can't get your fees back up once they're down.
Correct.
Oh.
So it's that smart business and you do to be successful is have a think about where you're best placed to win and where you're best placed to genuinely win that work and at a level and an amount that you are competitive, at the same time provide a good service. So it's not also the inverse of, that's right, I want to stick my margin up to 25% and win it because I'm amazing. Well, are you providing 25% worth of service that somebody else isn't providing? That's what I meant by an art in tendering. It's you need to learn how to best position you and your serviceability.
So this is me being naive right now. So let's say you win the tender, your margins are $5 an hour, and you're sending candidates and you go, sorry, that guy's actually $7.50.
Yeah.
Can you just not charge $5 and just put your rates up?
Are you saying if the PSA is saying $5 and you're going $7.50?
And then you just send them an invoice for $7.50 margin instead of $5.
I mean, yeah, you technically can, but then you probably will. You're probably jeopardizing your business being on the panel, because most of these PSA agreements that consultants don't perhaps see or at a desk level don't see is their service level agreements. So if you breach as a business, I mean, anybody that has a big compliance team will be able to tell you, I go through all these forms and someone checks my rates all the time. It's not because the businesses love employing someone to lean over your shoulder. It's because you can genuinely get kicked out of a panel and sometimes locked out for 8 years.
Yeah, okay.
Because someone decided to go, I'm going to be a little rogue. There are ways to do that. There is ways, again, this is where the relationship and the art of influence comes back into it for old school recruiting, right? And if you speak to your client and say, this candidate, you've asked for a clear talent gap in where you're sitting. And this happens all the time in tech or like specialist roles like engineering. You ask for this. I'll give you a real life example. I recruited for the deputy chief engineer for pavements at TMR, which is fascinating because it's a candidate pool full of people who like to talk about concrete. Solid. So what happened?
Solid. Oh, I got it. Whoa, that went over my head, Sam.
But again, there's 5 of these people in the entirety of Australia who can genuinely do this job and be fascinated by concrete and the laminar flow of solid rock, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I was able to go to the client and say, well, I know you've capped here, the margin, but the work that I'm actually giving you and access to these candidates that you wouldn't have without me, I do need the margin to be a bit higher. So I know our contract says that we can only go here, but what about we can look at it from a different perspective, like contribute to the other services that we can add, or, you know, I know most agencies have this. You can either throw in some extra stuff on top, and that is outside of contract, and that helps fill my margin. But again, they see the value in it. They're like, yeah, true. Without you, would have probably only spoken to maybe 2 of them and hired the internal person, because that's how I know where to go.
Love that. Just 1 second. Hey Sergi, can you do me a huge favor? Can you just call this person and tell them that I'm going to be late? I've actually got a meeting for some reason right now. Sorry for this.
That's all right. What time is it?
It's 10.
Okay.
How do I get into my emails, Robbie? That's him there. Can you just call him and say, hey, Blake's going to be running late. He'll call you when he's done. Robbie, yep. Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I do have to also run at 10:30 because I have at 11 o'clock.
That's
Yeah, I've got a 10:30 too.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So you mentioned also like there's 3 big players. What's the percentage like between Robert Walters, Hayes, and Randstad? Is it like 95% of spend goes?
No, it's over the top. I'll give you the top 10 because that's, again, very...
Serge, just say I'll be 10 minutes. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. So the...
This podcast has it all.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, this is what I mean. Gov is sexy. It's all the drama.
Sexy,
There's so much happening. I love it. So I'm glad that we're trying to busting the myth of Gov being boring. So I love it. No, so the spend in government, and without going into specific agencies, what I will say is that it's the majority of all the spend is within the top 10 suppliers. And that is not, again, that's information that's available for everybody. So most of them do have about 90% of the spend sits in the top 10.
That's crazy to know that.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask you a question back. Why do you think that is? What do you, from where you sit, what do you think drives that volume of work to just the top percent?
It's brand.
No.
Time in the seat, amount of recruiters trying to fill roles.
It's honestly market knowledge. Like, think about all of the top 10 of the bigger suppliers that are in market, right? What do they have that smaller agencies don't? Specialist consultants in government. Most of the smaller agencies tend to think, oh, I can comms role, I can do that. I've done a comms role with so and so and so and so. 2 and 2 does not make 3. It's just sometimes you've got to focus your energy. If you don't focus on your market, you don't focus on a niche. You cannot be every man to every dog. You know what I mean? Like that is one of the reasons why the spend kind of is a leaky bucket. Whenever you go for a low margin play, you need depth and you need concentration of people working in that market. And that's how, back to Randstad, that's what we did. We focused on not just one consultant somewhere doing once a quarter, caught up with somebody that said, hey, have you thought about government? I picked 3 or 4 that I did every week. Hey, how can I help you? How can I help you win business? And that person did it again and again and again.
So you're just saying, so what you're saying is it's just that the big agencies, well, the top suppliers, they just have a solely focused, dedicated gov, like let's just win all the gov work. And then the rest of the suppliers, they just have it as part of their wheelhouse.
Correct.
Nice to have.
Yeah, it's a nice to have, but these big agencies, they got the resources to go, no, let's double down to a strictly gov sector. So if a small agency adopted that type of mentality, they could be ultra successful. If you had just a little team of 4 or 5 recruiters that only did gov recruitment and then knew gov, you could just be crushing it as a small agency on gov.
Exhibit A, 6 degrees. That's what we did.
Yeah, true.
That's
On talent?
Yeah, well, see, On Talent just started that now, and so are the other public sector people, and there's a whole larger bunch of people working on just government, right? But one of the best parts of working in a business, and that's the reason why I went for a boutique firm, right? I love their reputation in the exec search space, but they had the appetite to go, we get that we don't work in the space and you have a bit of a strategy on how to win here. And they gave me the freedom to set up a division that only worked in government. Now, that was a huge cultural change internally because people were like, well, why is this role earmarked to you and why does it go this way? Why? It's because we've got a bigger picture thinking, which is we want a longer 5-year strategy where this is where it's going to go. And that was because I was able to set up a gov team that only did government.
Yeah, I honestly could sit here talking about this for hours.
Hey, Yay!
But you know, this actually might be an interesting segue. We actually just randomly started a new section. What do we start with Jack from Yakka?
Okay, what is it?
Okay, so what we do
Yeah.
is every guest that we get on
Yeah.
has to ask the next guest a question.
Okay.
And so this is actually from Jack at Yakka Solutions. He's actually part of Ex-Recruiter. He's a construction recruiter down in Parks.
Yep.
And his question for you, Sam, is it right if I call you Sam?
Yep.
Great. What is the best advice you've ever been given in recruitment?
Oh, great question. Do you want to specifically in recruitment, or the best advice that I've gotten that I use in recruitment that has helped me?
Whatever you think is the most impactful answer.
Okay, the thing that constantly in my head and helps me BD even to today is remembering the advice that I got and I worked on call center back in the day. And this is one of my managers who pulled me aside because when I felt like sales was not for me, I was like, I suck at this job. I'm quitting and going to write economic policy or whatever it was. He said, remember, on the phone, you're the only Sam that's going to call that person today. No one else is going to be you. No one else is going to have your terrible dad jokes. No one else is going to bore them with government. Pick up the phone. That's the only version of you they're going to speak to. So the noise suddenly disappears in my head. You know, I stop thinking about, people listening to me on the phone or whatever, imposter syndrome that you go through. I am the only Sam that's going to call them today, as in the only me that's going to be on the phone with that person today. They're not going to interact with me in any other realm. So that's it. Just pick up the phone and have a chat. Enough to get the crap of things that go through your head when you pick up the phone off your desk and you just pick up the phone.
I love that. It's the only version of you that they're ever going to speak to.
That's it.
How good.
So you decide your version.
That's it. And you take the pressure off, right? Stop thinking about strategy. I was talking to this person, that person, government, blah, blah, blah. You're like, only version of me they're going to speak to. Doesn't matter if it doesn't matter. That's it. Just pick up the phone. Say hello.
I love that. How
Awesome.
good. And what question do you want to ask the next guest?
Oh, good question. What would you say is the biggest problem one of your clients has ever put in front of you that you thought that's a head scratcher? How do I solve that?
I love that. That's good. Well, we'll make sure we ask the next guest and we'll send you the clip and see what the answer is.
It's awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on
No
Confessions of a Recruiter, Sam. This has been super insightful. We've learnt a lot and we appreciate you coming on today.
Go was sexy. Keep it happening.
Go was sexy.
Go be sexy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Samantha.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to another Confessions of a Recruiter podcast with Blake and Declan. We hope you enjoyed and got a lot of value and insights out of this episode. If you do have any questions or you would like to recommend someone to come on the Confessions podcast, we would love any introductions. And remember the rule of the podcast: like, share, and recommend it to a friend. Until next time.